Wrangell Street. Elias National Park and Preserve is a United States national park and national preserve managed by the National Park Service in south-central Alaska. The park and preserve was established in 1980 by the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act. This protected area is included in an International Biosphere Reserve and is part of the Kluane, Wrangell Street, Elias Glacier Bay at St.Elias UNESCO World Heritage Site. The park and preserve form the largest area managed by the National Park Service in the United States by area, with a total of 13,175,799 acres. An expanse that could encapsulate a total of 6 Yellowstone national parks. The park includes a large portion of the St.Elias Mountains, which include most of the highest peaks in the United States and Canada, yet within 10 miles of tidewater, one of the highest reliefs in the world. Wrangell Street. Elias borders on Canada's Kluane National Park and Reserve to the east and approaches the U.S. Glacier Bay National Park to the south. The chief distinction between park and preserve lands is that sport hunting is prohibited in the park and permitted in the preserve. In addition, 9,078,675 acres of the park are designated as the largest single wilderness in the United States. Wrangell Street. Elias National Monument was initially designated on December 1, 1978, by President Jimmy Carter using the Antiquities Act, pending final legislation to resolve the allotment of public lands in Alaska. Establishment as a national park and preserve followed the passage of the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act in 1980. The park, which is bigger than the country Switzerland, has long, extremely cold winters and a short summer season. It supports a variety of large mammals in an environment defined by relative land elevation. Plate tectonics are responsible for the uplift of the mountain ranges that cross the park. The park's extreme high point is Mount St.Elias at 18,008 feet, the second tallest mountain in both the United States and Canada. The park has been shaped by the competing forces of volcanism and glaciation. Mount Wrangell is an active volcano, one of several volcanoes in the western Wrangell Mountains. In the St. Elias Range, Mount Churchill has erupted explosively within the past 2,000 years. The park's glacial features include Malaspina Glacier, the largest Piedmont glacier in North America, Hubbard Glacier, the longest tidewater glacier in Alaska, and Nabesna Glacier, the world's longest valley glacier. The Bagley ice field covers much of the park's interior, which includes 60% of the permanently ice-covered terrain in Alaska. At the center of the park, the boomtown of Kennecott exploited one of the world's richest deposits of copper from 1903 to 1938, exposed by and in part incorporated into Kennecott Glacier. The mine buildings and mills, now abandoned, compose a National Historic Landmark District. Geography. Wrangell Street. Elias National Park and Preserve includes the entire Wrangell Range, the western portion of the St. Elias Mountains and the eastern portion of the Chugach Mountains. Lesser ranges in the park or preserve include the Nutsotin Mountains, which are an extension of the Alaska Range, the Granite Range and the Robinson Mountains. Broad rivers run in glacial valleys between the ranges, including the Chitina River, Chisena River and the Nabesna River. All but the Chisena and Nabesna are tributaries to the Copper River, which flows along the western margin of the park and which has its headwaters within the park at the Copper Glacier. The park includes dozens of glaciers and ice fields. The Bagley ice field covers portions of the St. Elias and Chugach Ranges, and Malaspina Glacier covers most of the southeastern extension of the park, with Hubbard Glacier at the park's extreme eastern boundary, the largest tidewater glacier in North America. The eastern boundary of the park is Alaska's border with Canada, where it is adjoined by Kluane National Park and Reserve. On the southeast, the park is bounded by Yakutat Bay, Tongass National Forest and the Gulf of Alaska. The remainder of the southern boundary follows the crest of the Chugach Mountains, adjoining Chugach National Forest. The western boundary is the Copper River, and the northern boundary follows the Mentasta Mountains and borders Tetla National Wildlife Refuge. Mount St. Elias is the second highest mountain in both Canada and the United States. In total, 9 of the 16 highest peaks on U.S. soil are located in the park, along with North America's largest subpolar ice field, glaciers, rivers, an active volcano, and the historic Kennecott copper mines. Both the St. Elias and Wrangell ranges have seen volcanic activity. The St. Elias volcanoes are considered extinct, but some of the volcanoes of the Wrangell Range have been active in Holocene time. 10 separate volcanoes have been documented in the western Wrangell Range, of which Mount Blackburn is the highest and Mount Wrangell is the most recently active. Mount St. Elias is situated on the border of Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Kluane National Park and Reserve. At 18,074 feet, nearly 66% of park and preserve land is designated as wilderness. The Wrangell St. Elias Wilderness is the largest designated wilderness in the United States. The park region is divided between national park lands, which only allow subsistence hunting by local rural residents, and preserve lands, which allow sport hunting by the general public. Preserve lands include the Chitina Valley north of the river, 2 parts of the Copper River Valley east of the river, most of the Chisana and Nabesna valleys, and lands along Yakutat Bay. The park is accessible by highway from Anchorage. 2 rough gravel roads wind through the park, which makes portions of the interior accessible for backcountry camping and hiking. Chartered aircraft also fly into the park. Wrangell St. Elias received more than 60,000 visitors in 2011. The park area includes a few small settlements. Nabesna and Chisana are in the northern part of the park. Kennecott and McCarthy are relatively close together in the center of the park, with a few smaller settlements nearby and along the 60-mile McCarthy Road. Chitina serves as a gateway community where the McCarthy Road meets the Edgerton Highway along the Copper River. The McCarthy Road and the Nabesna Road are the only significant roads in the park. Activities. The Edgerton Highway runs along the valley of the Copper River on the western margin of the park. The headquarters and visit center are at mile 106.8 near Copper Center. Road access to the park's interior is along the Nabesna Road and the McCarthy Road. The abandoned mining town of Kennecott can be accessed by a footbridge from a continuation of the McCarthy Road. Backcountry access is available by air taxi services. Access to the park is open all year, and most of the park facilities are open from May to September, although some locations open as late as the end of May and close in mid-August. The main visitor center remains open on weekdays in the winter. The climate of the park's interior is dominated by long, cold winters in which temperatures may remain below freezing for 5 months. Nighttime low temperatures can sink to -50 degrees Fahrenheit and daytime highs of 5 degrees Fahrenheit to 7 degrees Fahrenheit are usual. Summer lasts 2 months, June and July, bringing flowers and biting insects, with maximum temperatures of 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Late summers can bring drizzle. It begins to get cool in August, and first snows fall in September. Conditions are more temperate along the coast, and the high mountains retain snow all year. The Kendesny campground on the Nabesna Road is the only Park Service-managed campground in the park. There are a number of private campgrounds and lodgings on the McCarthy and Nabesna roads, and there are 14 public-use cabins. Most of these cabins are accessible only by air. A few are accessible by road near the Slana Ranger Station, and most are associated with airstrips. Backcountry camping is allowed without a permit. There are few established and maintained trails in the park. Mountain biking is mainly limited to roads due to prevailing bogway conditions in the summer. On the other hand, float trips on the rivers are a popular way to see the park on the Copper, Nazina, Kennecott and Chitina rivers. Because the park and preserve includes some of the highest peaks in North America, they are a popular destination for mountain climbing. Of the 70 tallest mountains in Alaska, 35 are in the park, including 7 of the top 10 peaks. Climbing these peaks is technically demanding, and requires expeditions to access remote and dangerous terrain. In addition to the Copper Center Visitor Center, the park maintains a visitor center at Kennecott and an information station at mile 59 on the McCarthy Road. There are ranger stations at Slana on the Nabesna Road, in Chitina at the end of the Edgerton Highway, and in Yakutat. The Yakutat Ranger Station is shared with Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve. The park has 3 improved airstrips at McCarthy, May Creek and Chisana, with a number of unimproved strips scattered around the park. Air taxis provide sightseeing services and visitor transportation within the park based in Glenalyn, Chitina, Nabesna, and McCarthy. Air taxis provide access to sea kayak tours that operate in the vicinity of Icy Bay. Farther east on the park's coast, cruise ships are frequent visitors to Hubbard Glacier in Yakutat Bay. Sport hunting and trapping are allowed only within the preserve lands. Subsistence hunting by local residents is permitted in both the park and preserve. Hunting is managed jointly by the National Park Service and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, which issues hunting licenses. The use of off-road vehicles is restricted to specific routes, and permits are required to use ORVs in the preserve. Geology. The southern part of Alaska is composed of a series of terrains that have been pushed against the North American landmass by the action of plate tectonics. The Pacific Plate moves northwestward relative to the North American Plate at about 2 inches to 2.5 inches per year, meeting the continental landmass in the Gulf of Alaska. The Pacific Plate subducts under the Alaskan landmass, compressing the continental rocks and giving rise to a series of mountain ranges. Terrains or island arcs carried on the surface of the Pacific Plate are carried against the Alaskan landmass and themselves compressed and folded, but are not fully carried into the Earth's interior. As a result, a series of terrains, collectively known as the Wrangell composite terrain, have been pushed against the south coast of Alaska, followed by the southern margin composite terrain to the south of the Border Ranges fault system. A byproduct of the subduction process is the formation of volcanoes at some distance inland from the subduction zone. At present, the Yakutat terrain is being pushed under material of similar density, resulting in uplift on a combination of accretion and subduction. Nearly all of Alaska is composed of a series of terrains that have been pushed against North America. The coastal region is seismically active with frequent large earthquakes. Major quakes occurred in 1899 and 1958, followed by the 1964 Alaska earthquake. The 1979 St.Elias earthquake reached magnitude 7.9. 6 terrains and one sedimentary belt have been documented in Wrangell-St. Elias. From north to south, and oldest to youngest, they are the Windia Yukon-Tanana, Gravina Nutsotin Belt, Wrangellia Alexander, Chugach, Prince William and Yakutat terrains. The Wrangellian rocks include fossiliferous sedimentary rocks interspersed with volcanic rocks. The Alaskan coast reached an approximation of its modern configuration about 50 million years ago, with the complete subduction of the now vanished cooler plate under North America. The present subduction of the Pacific plate in southern Alaska has been going on for about 26 million years. The oldest volcanoes in Wrangell-St. Elias National Park and Preserve are about 26 million years old, near the Alaska-Yukon Territory border in the St. Elias Range. Activity has moved north and west from that area. Volcanic activity. The majority of the volcanoes in the Wrangell volcanic field lie at the western end of the Wrangell Mountains. The western Wrangell volcanoes are unusual for subduction-related volcanoes, in the generally non-explosive nature. The majority of the volcanoes are unusually large shield volcanoes that built to the present size quickly from voluminous flows of andesite lavas, which erupted from multiple centers. Their growth is associated with the arrival of the Yakutat terrain, with considerable activity until about 200,000 years ago, when movement along the Denali, Tochanda and Fairweather faults began to accommodate some of the Pacific plate's motion. For that reason, very large magmatic flows are regarded as unlikely in the present day. The majority of the Wrangell volcanoes are shield volcanoes with large collapsed calderas at the summits. All but Mount Wrangell have been modified by glaciers to sharper, steeper relief than the gentle, rounded forms that characterize young shield volcanoes. The shield volcanoes are surrounded by cinder cones that formed after the main volcano. The 10 highest summits in the Wrangell Mountains are all of volcanic origin, and several are among the most voluminous volcanoes in the world. Mount Wrangell is the only Wrangell volcano considered active. Wrangell measures 14,163 feet in height. It was built by a series of large lava flows from 600,000 to 200,000 years ago. 3 comparatively modest eruptive episodes were reported in 1784, 1884–85 and 1900. The gently sloping dome features an ice-filled summit caldera measuring 3.6 miles by 2.5 miles. 3 craters containing fumaroles produce a steam plume that can be visible on calm, clear days. The summit produces occasional phreatic eruptions that can coat the ice with ash. During the 1980s, the summit's heat flux was sufficient to melt 100 million cubic meters of ice and form a small crater lake. That activity has subsided since 1986 and ice has accumulated since. The last large eruption of magma from Wrangell is estimated to have been about 50,000 to 100,000 years ago. The summit caldera is estimated to have collapsed between 200,000 and 50,000 years ago. 13,009-foot Mount Zanetti is a large cinder cone on Wrangell's northwest flank, estimated to be less than 25,000 years old. Mount Drum is the westernmost Wrangell volcano. 12,010 feet high, it dominates the local landscape more than much higher mountains. Mount Drum is either a shield volcano or a stratovolcano that has been extensively eroded by glacial activity. preceded by explosive activity about 250,000–150,000 years ago that destroyed summit that may have once measured 14,000 to 16,000 feet. These eruptions generated extensive mud flows, and represent the last activity at Mount Drum. Mount Drum supports at least 11 glaciers that flow from its summit ice field. Mount Sanford is the tallest of the western Wrangell volcanoes at 16,237 feet, the 13th highest peak in North America. It is a complex shield volcano that first formed about 900,000 years ago. The latest eruption is estimated to have been between 320,000 and 100,000 years ago. Like Drum, Sanford has a large ice field above 8,000 feet that feeds a series of glaciers. Capitol Mountain is located near Mount Sanford, but is much smaller at 7,731 feet in height. It is a shield volcano, about 10 miles in diameter. Its summit has collapsed to form a caldera roughly 2.5 miles in diameter. Its last activity was about 1 million years ago, and it has been deeply eroded by glacial activity. Tornado Peak is an older and larger neighbor of Capitol Mountain, 9,358 feet tall with a 4-mile by 5-mile summit caldera. The shield volcano last erupted 900,000 years ago and has been dissected by glaciers. The Skookum Creek volcano is a volcanic center that has been heavily eroded. It was active between 3.2 million and 2 million years ago. 7,125 feet high at its highest point, the old shield volcano has been severely eroded. Its caldera is surrounded by a series of Dacian rhyolite domes. Mount Jarvis is a shield volcano, 13,421 feet high, with one or more indistinct summit calderas. It is covered with ice and erupted between 1.7 million and 1 million years ago. Mount Blackburn is at 16,390 feet, the highest point in the Wrangells, the 12th highest peak in North America, and the oldest volcano in the range. It is a shield volcano with a filled caldera that was active between 4.2 million and 3.4 million years ago. Mount Blackburn is ice-covered and is the source of Kennecott Glacier and Nabesna Glacier, among others. The Boomerang volcano is a very small shield volcano, only rising 3,949 feet. It is at least 1 million years old and is overlaid by deposits from Capitol Mountain. Mount Gordon is a cinder cone, one of the largest in the Wrangells at 9,040 feet. Several hot springs are mud volcanoes in the vicinity of Mount Drum produce warm brackish water charged with carbon dioxide. The largest are called Shrub, Upper Kluane and Lower Kluane. The deposits of hydrothermally altered mud have built cones 150 to 300 feet high and 8,000 feet in diameter. The chief volcanoes in the St.Elias range are Mount Boner and Mount Churchill, at 16,421 feet and 15,638 feet, respectively. They are the highest and fourth highest volcanoes in the United States and the fourth and seventh highest in North America, and Boner is the 10th highest peak of any kind in North America. Churchill is often regarded as a subsidiary peak of Boner. Both are ice-covered stratovolcanoes. Churchill is the source of the White River ash. It erupted about 100 AD and 700 AD, spreading ash across much of Alaska and northwestern Canada. Glaciers and ice fields. The mountain ranges of Wrangell-St.Elias account for 60% of glacial ice in Alaska, covering more than 1,700 square miles. The glaciers have advanced and retreated repeatedly, reaching the sea and filling the valley of the Copper River. A glacial dam in the valley retained Lake Atna during the Wisconsin glaciation. Drainage of the lake has scoured the riverbed to bedrock above the Bremner River. Several features are particularly notable. The Malaspina Glacier is the largest Piedmont glacier in North America. Hubbard Glacier is at 75 miles the longest tidewater glacier in Alaska, and the Nabesna Glacier is the world's longest valley glacier at more than 75 miles. Glaciers in Wrangell St.Elias are mostly in retreat. The Bagley ice field has grown thinner and its glaciers have retreated, including portions feeding Malaspina Glacier, which is stagnant or retreating. Malaspina's west and east lobes filled Icy Bay and Yakutat Bay, respectively, about 1,000 years ago, and Guyot, Yahtse and Tinal glaciers have individually retreated at the head of Icy Bay. However, Hubbard Glacier advanced from 1894, closing Russell Fjord. Minerals. 5 major mining districts were developed in Wrangell St.Elias during the heyday of mining between the 1890s and 1960. Gold was found in the Bremner district in 1901, and in the Nazina area near Kennecott. Most of the gold from these areas was placer gold, obtained through hydraulic mining. Copper nuggets were found with the gold and were usually discarded as uneconomical to ship until roads were improved to the area. Other gold strikes were made in the Chisana district, with a minor stampede between 1913 and 1917 to the area by miners. During the 1930s, lode ore was mined in the Nabesna district. The chief source of copper was the Kennecott lode next to the Kennecott Glacier. The copper sulfide ore assayed at 70% copper when first discovered, among the richest ever found. Total production amounted to more than 536,000 metric tons of copper and about 100 metric tons of silver. After the chalcocite ore was exhausted, the mines worked malachite and azurite deposits embedded in hydrothermally altered dolomite. The copper is believed to have been dissolved in hot water moving through copper-rich Nikolai greenstone, then redeposited in concentrated form in chitterstone limestone through reaction with sulfide-rich waters in the limestone. A number of other sites on the southern side of the Wrangells were investigated and prospected, and some even produced small amounts of ore, but none were commercially exploited. Large but low-grade deposits of nickel and molybdenum were investigated as late as the 1970s.